Swazdola, Sarah! I'm Seraphis, the procrastinating space pirate, and today, well, I'm not going to talk about my home game setting, as much as I'm going to talk with you about something I think a lot of people have a problem with. Your game is not the game mechanics, it's the setting. Let's get into it, shall we? Here's the thing I hear even in my own group. But we play D&D. How would switching to Cypher even work? It'll work fine. Better even. To simply answer this in a tech perspective, you know those video games that, say, used Unreal Engine, then used the Frostbite, then maybe used Unity, then went back to the latest Unreal? Yeah, Halo, Mass Effect, Dead Space, they'll still be their respective same franchise setting, it's just a different engine behind the scenes. But what about with a TTRPG? Do you think the novels of the games read like the games? Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, Eberron, Spelljammer. They've all had novels written within their setting, and they'll break the TTRPG mechanics to tell their stories. Because in a lot of these cases, the game mechanics those settings used were so limiting it was redundant to even consider them in the story. Tracy Hickman is well known for having his own table of rules when he runs Dragonlance games, that are not the rules of Advanced, 2E, 3E, or 5E. They're the rules he uses that make sense to his world, that he co-created. That's why sometimes, when I mention about Dragonlance rules, people find that at odds with what this edition of the game says, and yeah, it's because this is how the co-creator runs his game. So what am I getting at here? Well, as my own example, a few years ago I decided that enough was enough. I'm sick of the current edition of the system we were playing being so poorly designed in every logical way that I told my players we're switching. Now, I initially gave them a choice between Fantasy Age and Cypher System, but I quickly realized that this is about me, not them. So I took dictatorship of the group and changed it from a choice to an announcement. Because the basics of it was that I didn't have all the GRP Fantasy Age material I needed, and trying to get it had been an ongoing attempt I had been struggling with for several years at that point, and still is. But Cypher? MCG has a local distributor. The costs of hardcovers and PDFs can be bundled for cheaper, and I already had a few Cypher books. So I told my group it was Cypher we were switching to, and there was a smattering of discourse, mostly around what would happen with their characters. See, that's what the players really care about, their stuff, their characters, and sometimes they don't see the difference between their character and the system they play their character in. I know, for example, one of my players wanted to change their Dragonborn Barbarian to a human investigator. Both are fun and fine, but the change happened because they are under the impression that it's not just a system change, but a setting change. It wasn't, it isn't. I had talked about running a separate game in Numenera, but the point of using Numenera's 6 types over Cypher's 4 types was because it gave the kind of feel my homebrew setting had, what with the jacks and the rights. Basically, my setting has inspirations from settings and media like Eberron, Spelljammer, Slayers, Overlord, the game Ray Pratchett worked on, not the anime, and Final Fantasy 8 and 10. So, along with conventional fantasy tropes, it has more fantastical things too, like the movie Krull, where it's pretty standard medieval fantasy setting with creatures, magic, and the like. But then a massive spaceship castle comes down from outer space, and an invading army of slayers with laser-shooting quarterstaffs start killing all opposition. Meanwhile, the beast's fortress spaceship teleports to a new random location every morning at first light. Seriously, people? Watch Krull to up your fantasy tabletop role-playing game. Anyway, my game has always had those elements in it from back when it was my friend's game, due to things like Kroll, The Mummy, Stargate, and Indiana Jones. Obviously all the titles that came out before 2000. So this shit is normal to me and my friends that played our game back in high school. My Dragonborn player, since I started DMing in 2016, felt like our D20 system game was one thing where her Dragonborn lived, and the Cypher system was where this new character would be played. But it's the same setting. And you know what? The change is a lot better, not just for my players, but for any of you too. Because you shouldn't try to recreate your characters from one system to another exactly, especially one focused on combat to one focused on narrative. Just don't do it, people. You'll never be happy. Instead, If you really are role-playing, and not just being chaotic meme murder hobos, then you should be able to find the core points of your character and be able to bring them to life in any system. As an example, my first 2nd edition character was Seraphis, my namesake. He was a Dark Elf Paladin who fought and was lost to seal back away a powerful fiend. I really liked the name, but didn't want to reuse it, so I came up with Cypher, obviously an anagram of Seraphis. But Sia became a magic user, a sorcerer, and became my go-to creation in fantasy RPGs going forward. He's been recreated in games like Dragon Age, The Elder Scrolls, Pillars of Eternity, Shadowrun, and more. His theme is always a magic user with powers based on mysticism, divining, transmutation, teleportation, and soul manipulation. As long as I can find a style that can be replicated with those games, or any games, I can find a way to recreate him. Anyway, I realize I keep going off on tangents here, but this was meant to be a lot more conversational than any of my other stuff. Getting back on point. For anyone that's never looked at pre-WotC content, you might be surprised to learn that the setting of Greyhawk in Spelljammer is described along the lines of:
the free city of Greyhawk sees the most activity from outside travelers. It's a daily sight for a citizen to see airships, mechanical carriages, planar travelers, spelljammers, and more come through the city.
This was the original default setting in TSR days. This has become, however, more niche, as the Tolkien-esque style of fantasy has become more prominent, and the loss of fantastical ideas inspired by pre-science proven concepts to build into fantasy settings is made more scarce. Look no further than current Spelljammer. Original Spelljammer was inspired by pre-15th century ideas of what Spelljammer was, based on what sailing the ocean was like. This is where the idea of wild space, the shallows coastlines within a crystal sphere, and the phlogiston, the deep ocean-like colour streams once you leave the crystal spheres, comes from. Shadowrun and Earthdawn both had similar concepts back in the day too. And this is getting all over the place. I've been a bit scatterbrained writing this, so I'm going to wrap this up. The point here has been simple. Your setting doesn't rely on the system you play it with, so your character's theme can be adapted to any change to the system. Because if you really are role-playing, then being a knight, a wizard, a thief, or whatever shouldn't affect changing to a different system that doesn't have those confines. To bring it to my own example, my Dragonborn Barbarian player's character in WotC's 5th edition will be playing a Dragonfolk warrior who wields an enchanted weapon, as they are key aspects of the character. Likewise, if I recreated Cypher in Cypher, they would be a mystical elf adept who dances with dark matter, or sees beyond, or crafts magic spells. Or maybe I'd just make a new Fyrkite using abilities from all three and call it Masters the Mystic Ways. Seraphis too could be recreated as a noble elf warrior who stands as a bastion, with a foci swap to include a divine blessing based on either a lore, spirit, protection, light, or war deity, because the character was a noble warrior who used holy power to destroy the darkness and defend the innocent. As you can see, it's nothing to do with being mechanically a paladin from another system. It's about fighting evil and defending the innocent. Well, yeah, I started talking Cypher again a lot sooner than intended. I don't really like the negative vibe of the last video, so I wanted to cover something that's still important to me, but can be covered, say, in a Cypher way. Haha. I hope you all enjoyed this little chat, talk, whatever. Next week I'm going to start covering the Cypher System genre books, or as we call them in the community, the white books. You'll probably notice that I don't ask you to like and subscribe, because I believe that if you like my content, you'll do that, and if you don't, you won't. Basically, I'm treating you as if you were an intelligent human being, so I will never do that stuff. That's my promise. Oh, I've also opened up my community section, so if you'd like to engage or ask questions, that works. Or just leave a comment, I'm happy to chat. Thanks for watching, everyone. Nexus, do the thing.